An unlikely sanctuary, the gentle hum of the aircraft was a siren's song to Jenna Rossi's exhaustion. Every vibration through the fuselage seemed to seep into her bones. A heavy lullaby after 24 hours of frantic packing, soothing. A teething infant, and navigating the chaos of an international airport alone. The chime of the seatbelt sign, the flight attendant's muffled announcement about their initial descent into Rom, none of it pierced the deep, desperate sleep that had claimed her the moment she'd sat down. What finally stirred her was not a sound, but a sensation. The solid warmth beneath her cheek shifted minutely, and the crisp, clean scent of soap and starched cotton filled her senses. Her eyes fluttered open to the soft lighting of the cabin, confusion swirling in her sleep-addled mind. To lean against the window, to curl into the cold plexiglass. Instead, her head rested comfortably on the shoulder of the man seated beside her. A hot flush of mortification burned her cheeks as she sat up abruptly, her heart hammering against her ribs. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice rough with sleep. Her immediate panicked instinct was to check on her daughter. Her hands flew to the empty baby carrier on her chest. But the panic that followed was short-lived and immediately replaced by a deeper, more primal fear. It was 6-month-old. Sophie was not in her arms. She was nestled securely in the stranger's embrace, her head cradled in the crook of his arm, sleeping with a peace that had been elusive for days. The man's hands, large and capable-looking, held her tiny form with an innate, surprising gentleness. One palm was spread protectively across her back, feeling the gentle rise and fall of her breathing. "She fussed a little while you were out," the man said, his voice a low, calm baritone that seemed to vibrate through the space between them. "You needed the rest. We managed." Jenna reached for her daughter, her movements hesitant. "Thank you. You really didn't have to." Her words trailed off as she finally took in the man's appearance. He wore a sharp, dark uniform she didn't recognize, its shoulders broad and epaulets crisp. His hair was cut short, practical, and his eyes a shade of deep ocean blue. Watched her with a focused alertness that suggested he hadn't slept a wink during the long flight from New York. He transferred Sophie back to her arms with effortless care, the baby sighing softly in her sleep at the transition. "Captain Rhys Thorne," he said, not offering a handshake, his gaze intensifying. "Ms. Rossi, you're in danger." The words landed not like a question, but a statement of fact, cold and hard. They hit Jenna like a physical blow, freezing the rest of her apology in her throat. She stared at him, searching his stern, handsome face for a sign of jest, of madness, anything but the steady, unwavering certainty she found there. "What are you talking about?" she breathed, instinctively pulling Sophie closer, the baby's warmth a small shield against the sudden chill. Rhys's eyes did a casual, practiced sweep of the cabin. The man in 23B, light gray suit, pretends to be engrossed in his tablet. "He's been watching you since JFK. A nervous laugh escaped her. "That's impossible. I don't know anyone. This is a work trip. I'm just nobody." "What kind of work?" His question was sharp, devoid of small talk. "Project manager for Aquapura. We're commissioning new water filtration systems for communities outside Rome." It's charity work." Rhys's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. 6 weeks ago. "Did you oversee a shipment through the port of Naples? Specialized membrane filters." The specificity was alarming. She had. It had been a nightmare of logistics, delayed by customs for days. Yes, they were a new, more efficient design. "Ow. What about them?" "Those membranes weren't for filtering water," Rhys said, his voice dropping even lower, forcing her to lean in to hear him. The intimate proximity sent an unwelcome shiver down her spine. They were acoustic polymer layers. Someone used your humanitarian shipment to smuggle components for a high-grade sonic emitter. Weapons, technology, Ms. Rossi. The blood drained from Jenna's face, leaving her cold. The engines whined as the plane began its final approach. Around them, the cabin came to life with the rustle of movement, but Jenna felt trapped in a shrinking bubble of horror. That can't be. Everything was inspected, documented, paperwork can be forged, protocols can be manipulated. Someone inside Aquapura is using it as a front for a black market tech operation. Arms trafficking. The weight of his words pressed down on her. Even if it were true, she was a pawn. I didn't know. I just did my job. I'm not responsible for the people looking for you. Don't care about your innocence. Reese interrupted, his blue eyes holding hers captive. Your liability. A witness who might have seen something you shouldn't have. And traveling internationally with an infant makes you an easy target. Sophie chose that moment too. Wake, her dark eyes blinking open. She didn't cry, just looked up at her mother with quiet curiosity, one small hand coming up to pat Jenna's cheek. The gesture, so normal and trusting, steeled Jenna's resolve. Whatever this was, her daughter would be protected. What do you want from me? She asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Right now, Reese said, his gaze briefly softening as it fell on Sophie. I need you to trust me. When we land, do not go to passport control. You and Sophie stay with me. As the plane's wheels touched down with a shriek of rubber, on tarmac, Jenna studied Captain Reese Thorne anew. His movements were economical, precise. He gathered his single bag with a fluid grace that spoke of military training. She noticed the subtle way his jacket didn't quite hang right, hinting at the presence of something concealed beneath it. The way his eyes never stopped moving, assessing, calculating, helped her organize Sophie's scattered belongings with the efficiency that was both comforting and frightening. How do you know all this? She asked, as the seatbelt sign dinged off. I'm with a security consultancy, he replied, choosing his words carefully. We've had this operation under surveillance. Your name came across our desk. 10 days ago, my name. You're not the first Aquapura employee to be used this way, but you might be the only one who hasn't had a tragic, unexplained accident. The chill returned, colder this time. She thought of her colleagues, their dedication to helping others. The betrayal was a bitter taste in her mouth. As they stood to disembark, Reese suddenly went still. He's on the move, he said quietly. Jenna didn't need to ask who. She could feel it, a prickling at the nape of her neck. Sophie began to fuss, sensing her mother's tension. What's the plan? Disappear into the crowd, Reese said, his body positioning itself subtly. Between her and the back of the plane, stay close. Do exactly as I say. They joined the river of passengers flowing into the Leonardo da Vinci terminal. The cacophony of languages, rolling luggage, and echoing announcements was overwhelming. Reese guided her with a light, confident touch on the small of her back, steering her away from the main thoroughfares toward a quieter corridor marked staff only. He swiped a keycard. And they were through, the door swinging shut behind them, muting the airport's chaos. Where are we going? Jenna asked, her voice echoing in the sterile hallway. Somewhere secure, he replied. My partner is meeting us. They moved quickly. Jenna glanced back once and saw the staff door open again. The man in the light gray suit stepped through, his eyes cold and purposeful as they locked onto hers. Reese saw her freeze. Move now. They broke into a run, their footsteps loud in the empty passage. At the end was another unmarked door. Reese didn't bother with a keycard. He typed a code into a keypad. Lock buzzed, and they spilled into a small windowless security office. A woman with intelligent eyes and her dark hair in a sleek braid looked up from a bank of monitors. Cutting it close, Reese, she said, her accent vaguely British. She stood, her gaze immediately falling on Sophie. Anya Sharma, she introduced herself to Jenna. We need to go. Your admirer just called for reinforcements. Jenna held her daughter, feeling the solid living weight of her. This is insane. Yesterday, I was just a mom on a business trip. Anya and Reese exchanged a glance. I'm afraid it's more complicated than that, Anya said softly. We did some digging during your flight. The people after you aren't just interested in what you might have seen. They're interested in what she carries. Jenna stared at her. What? Anya's expression was grim. They're not just after you, Jenna. They're after Sophie. The words hung in the air, sucking the oxygen from the room. Jenna looked down at her daughter, whose eyes were wide and alert, as if she were listening. Every cell in Jenna's body screamed in primal, maternal fury. She's a baby, she whispered, her voice cracking. Reese stepped closer, his presence a solid wall beside her. We don't have time to explain here. I need to get you both to safety, but you need to understand this won't be over quickly. These people are relentless. Jenna looked between them, seeing the hard truth in their faces. A strange calm settled over her panic, forged in the fierce need to protect her child. Then what do? We fight, Reese said, a flicker of respect in his blue eyes. But first, we run. Outside the door, the sound of hurried footsteps grew louder. Anya grabbed a go-bag from under the desk. Back way. Now. As they fled through another exit, Jenna took one last look at the monitor. The man in the gray suit was there, joined by two others. They looked professional, dangerous. She pulled Sophie closer, burying her face in her daughter's soft hair, and followed Reese and Anya into the unknown, her old life vanishing behind her. The black sedan moved through Rome's early evening traffic with a predatory grace. Anya's hands steady on the wheel as she navigated labyrinthine streets with an intimate knowledge that spoke of more than just tourism. Reese sat in the passenger seat, his gaze constantly scanning mirrors, side streets, and pedestrians with a focused intensity that made the inside of the car feel like a war room. Jenna held Sophie in the back, the baby's wide eyes taking in the blur of ancient stone and vibrant life outside the tinted windows. The Colosseum, the Forum, the bustling piazzas, they were just fleeting images from a world she was no longer a part of. Where are we going? Jenna finally asked, her voice sounding small against the hum of the engine. Somewhere they won't think to look immediately, Anya replied, taking a sharp turn into a narrow cobblestoned alley that seemed too small for the car. We have safe houses even our own government doesn't know about. The safe house was a nondescript apartment above a bustling trattoria in the Trastevere district. The scent of garlic, tomatoes, and baking bread wafted up through the floorboards. A stark, comforting contrast to the sterile fear of the airport. The apartment itself was sparsely furnished: a worn sofa, a wooden table, a few chairs. Blackout curtains were drawn over the windows. Reese immediately began a methodical sweep of the rooms, while Anya set up a sleek laptop on the table. Jenna stood in the center of the living room, swaying gently with Sophie in her arms. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a hollow trembling exhaustion in its wake. I still don't understand. How does a water filter become a weapon? Anya looked up from her laptop, her expression sympathetic but professional. The components you shipped were designed to be assembled into a directional sonic emitter. At low frequencies, it can cause disorientation, nausea. At high power, it can liquefy internal organs. Deniable, and highly sought. After on the black market, Reese returned from his sweep, nodding that the room was clear. The organization behind this is called Omnicrop, private military and research conglomerate with tendrils in everything from pharmaceuticals to aerospace. They're ghosts. Officially, they don't exist. And they're using my charity. Jenna felt sick. She thought of the villages waiting for clean water, the hope on people's faces in the project proposals. It had all been a lie, a cover for something monstrous. It's the perfect cover, Anya said. Humanitarian aid moves with less scrutiny. Who's going to suspect a shipment of water filters? She turned the laptop around. On the screen was a familiar face. Do you know this man? Jenna's blood ran cold. Matteo Bianchi. He's the regional director for Acquaputa in Italy. He hired me. He's the one who pushed through the Naples shipment paperwork when it got held up. The memory, once a testament to Matteo's efficiency, now felt sinister. He's also a high-level Omnicrop operative, Reese stated, his voice flat. We've been trying to pin him down for 2 years. The pieces were beginning to form. A terrifying picture. Jenna sank onto the sofa, holding Sophie tightly. Okay, so I was an unwitting mule for a weapons smuggler. Why are they still after me? Why not just let me be? I didn't know anything until you told me. Anya and Reese exchanged another one of those loaded glances. It was Reese who spoke, his voice uncharacteristically gentle. Jenna, during the flight while you were asleep, Sophie was fussing. She had a slight fever. I had a basic med kit in my bag. I used a digital thermometer to check her temperature. Jenna's heart stuttered. Is she okay? She's fine, he said quickly. But the thermometer I used isn't standard issue. It takes a rudimentary metabolic and neural scan. It's designed to detect anomalies in field operatives. Anya took over, her voice soft but clear. The readings it took from Sophie were off the charts, not in a medical way, but in a capability way. Her neural activity, her cellular regeneration rate, tits orders of magnitude beyond the norm. For an infant, a cold dread, deeper than any she had felt yet, began to seep into Jenna's bones. What are you saying? Omnicrop isn't just interested in what you might have seen, Anya said. They're interested in what she is. We believe Matteo Bianchi wasn't just using you to move equipment. He was monitoring you. Monitoring her. Jenna looked down at Sophie, who was gnawing contentedly on a teething ring, her bright eyes taking in the world with an alertness that suddenly seemed less like normal baby curiosity and more like something else entirely. She thought of all the extra checkups Matteo had insisted she'd take for her insurance, the blood work that was always routine, the developmental questionnaires that were more detailed than any she'd heard other mothers talk about. No, Jenna whispered, a denial against the unbearable truth. She's just a baby. My baby. We think you were selected for your genetic profile, Jenna, Reese said, kneeling in front of her so his eyes were level with hers. His proximity was no longer intimidating, it was an anchor. We think Omnicrop has a program to identify and track individuals with advantageous traits. They place them in positions where they can be useful, and they monitor their offspring. Sophie represents a natural culmination they've been trying to achieve artificially for decades. The room seemed to tilt. Her work, her pregnancy, her life, all of it felt like a carefully constructed lie. She had felt so proud to get the job at Aquapura, a career breakthrough that allowed her to provide for Sophie as a single mother. It had all been a setup. A soft chime came from Anya's laptop. She turned to it, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Her face tightened. They're triangulating.
Ow.
They found us faster than I anticipated.
Ow.
Reese was on his feet. Instantly, his body coiled and ready. Anya's expression was grim. It's not us. It's her. Sophie's pediatrician in New York, Dr. Evans. She implanted a subcutaneous microtransponder during Sophie's last round of vaccinations. It's emitting a low-frequency biometric signature, tracking her vitals, her location. Everything. The betrayal was so absolute, so intimate, it stole the air from Jenna's lungs. Dr. Evans, who had cooed over Sophie, who had reassured Jenna she was doing everything right. Every visit, every shot, had been another layer of the cage. Can we remove it? Jenna asked, her voice shaking with a new kind of fury. Not here, Anya said, already shutting down the laptop and grabbing a go bag. We don't have the equipment or the time. Right now, we run. Reese moved to the window, peering through a slit in the curtain. 2 cars, 4 men each, professional formation. We have maybe 3 minutes. The fear was still there. Live wire in Jenna's chest, but it was being rapidly consumed by a cold, burning rage. They had violated her child. It turned her own love and care into a weapon against them. She looked at Reese, at Anya, these strangers who were now her only allies. What do we do? She asked, standing up. Sophie held firmly against her. Reese looked at her, and for the first time, she saw something more than professional duty in his eyes. She saw respect. We fight back. But to do that, we need to disappear completely. We need to go somewhere not even Omnicrop can think to look. Where? Jenna asked. Anya shouldered her bag. The one place Matteo Bianchi would never expect. A protective mother to take her child. Into the heart of his own operation. Reese nodded, a grim smile touching his lips. We're going to a party. The drive was a tense, silent affair. Circuitous route through Rome's twilight streets that felt both deliberate and desperate. Anya's knuckles were white on the steering wheel, her eyes constantly flicking to the mirrors. Reese was a statue of alertness in the passenger seat, his hand resting near his jacket in a way that was anything but casual. Jenna held Sophie in the back, the baby's unusual quietness feeling like a silent accusation. Every block that passed felt like a tightening noose, the invisible transmitter in her daughter's skin, a beacon drawing their enemies closer. They finally stopped, not at a palazzo or a club, but in a quiet residential neighborhood across the Tiber. The building was an old, slightly crumbling apartment block with a faded green door. Anya led them not to the main entrance, but down a narrow side alley to a basement service entrance. The room they entered was a stark contrast to the romantic decay above. It was a tech hub, walls lined with servers humming softly, a bank of monitors displaying news feeds, security camera footage, complex data streams. "This is a safe hole, not a safe house," Anya explained, bolting the heavy door behind. It's designed for short-term high-security evals, not comfort." Reese immediately went to a locker, pulling out a device that looked like a handheld scanner. "Let's confirm the source of the signal." His voice was all business, but the look he gave Jenna was apologetic. "This might feel cold." Jenna laid a sleeping Sophie on a clean blanket on the floor, her heart breaking as RHYS passed the scanner over her daughter's tiny arm. A soft, consistent beep confirmed their worst fear. A tiny, almost invisible bump beneath Sophie's skin. A betrayal marked in flesh and blood. "We can't remove it yet," Anya said, her voice soft. "The risk of infection, or damaging the tissue, is too high without a sterile environment, and a medic, and if we disable it, they'll know we found it. For now, its signal as our paradox it leads them to us, but it also tells us what they know." The helplessness was a physical weight on Jenna's chest. "So we just wait for them to find us?" "No," Reese said, his jaw set. "We use their arrogance against them." "Anya, what's the status of the gala?" Anya brought up a sleek invitation. On a monitor, the Omnicorp Future Horizons benefactor gala. "Tonight at the Palazzo dei Diamanti, it's black tie, exclusive, and Matteo Bianchi will be there, accepting an award for humanitarian innovation." The irony was bitter. "We're going to crash it," Reese stated. "It's the last place they'd expect us. We get in, access their internal server, which will have lower security during a public event, download everything, and get out. Before they know we were there." "And how do we do that?" Jenna asked, the plan sounding insane. "We can't just walk in. We have a contact inside," Anya said. "A disgruntled former researcher who's been feeding us information. She's arranged credentials and outfits. She's our way in." As they began to formulate the plan as a journalist, Reese as security, Jenna as a +1, new alert flashed silently on the main monitor. An external perimeter sensor had been tripped. Not by Omnicorp's tactical team, but by a single individual approaching the basement door. Reese and Anya moved as one. Weapons drawn, pressing against the wall on either side of the entrance. The knock that came was not a forceful demand, but a pattern. 3 quick, 2 slow, a signal. Anya's eyes widened. "That's her, our contact, but she's not scheduled for another hour." She peered through a tiny fisheye lens camera, embedded. Beside the door, her breath hitched. "She's not alone." "Is it?" Reese asked, his voice a low growl. Anya's face was a mask of confusion. "She has a woman with her, unknown. She's holding up a handwritten note to the camera." "What does it say?" Jenna asked, her voice trembling. Anya turned, her expression utterly bewildered. "It says, 'Tell Jenna her sister is here.'" The world stopped. The air vanished from the room. Jenna stared, uncomprehending. That's not possible. "I don't have a sister." Was it the fact of her life? A lonely truth she had long since accepted. She was an only child, her parents gone years ago. Reese's eyes narrowed. "A trick." "Omnicorp is getting creative," Anya said, still watching the monitor. "Elena, our contact, she looks scared, but she's nodding. She's vouching for her and the woman." "Jenna, you need to see this." Jenna moved to the monitor, her legs feeling like lead. The screen showed a grainy black and white image of 2 women. One was anxious, looking over her shoulder on his contact. The other stood straight, her face determined, and her face. Jenna's hand flew to her mouth. The woman had her eyes, her same dark hair, the same stubborn set of her jaw. She looked like a reflection of Jenna from a slightly different angle. A life lived under a different sun. It can't be, she whispered, the denial automatic. But the visual evidence was undeniable. What's the play? Reese asked Anya, his weapon still trained on the door. Anya looked from the screen to Jenna's shell-shocked face. We don't have a choice. If this is a trap, we're already compromised. If it's not, we need to know. She made a decision. Stand down. Let them in. Be ready. Reese reluctantly lowered his weapon, positioning himself to react instantly. Anya unbolted the door, opening it just enough to let the two women slip through quickly before sealing it again. The basement room felt suddenly very small. Anya's. Contact Alina, a woman with nervous eyes, immediately started whispering to Anya, but Jenna couldn't hear her. All she could see was the other woman. She was slightly taller, her hair shorter and styled in a practical, chic cut. She wore a leather jacket and jeans, and she carried herself with a confidence that Jenna envied. But the resemblance was uncanny. It was like looking into a strange, future version of herself. The woman's eyes, the same shade of deep brown. As Jenna scanned the room, taking in the high-tech setup, Reese's protective stance. And finally, they landed on Jenna. A wave of emotion, disbelief, wonder, and a deep, aching sadness passed over her features. Jenna, she said, and her voice was different, laced with a slight Italian accent, but the timbre was hauntingly familiar. Who are you? Jenna asked, the words barely a breath. My name is Chiara. Chiara Rossi. She took a tentative step forward, her eyes glistening. After our parents died, the system had separated us. We were sent to family in America. I was kept here in Italy. I was told you were adopted by a wealthy family overseas, that it was for the best. She shook her head, a bitter smile touching her lips. I spent my life looking for you. My investigation into the foster care system, the manipulated records, it's what led me to Omnicorp. I didn't know I was looking for my own sister. Until I saw your employee file, Jenna felt the room spin. The foundation of her identity, the story of her lonely childhood, was cracking apart. My grandmother, she never said. She probably didn't know, Chiara said gently. The records were expertly forged. Omnicorp didn't just want to track genetic lines. They wanted to control them. Separating us was a way to create a control group, to see how we developed apart. Her gaze then fell on Sophie, sleeping on the blanket. Her expression shifted to one of fierce protectiveness, and they were waiting for this. For her. She's the reason I had to find you now. My sources inside say their interest has become active. They're not just observing anymore. They're preparing to acquire. The word acquire hung in the air, cold and horrifying. It cut through Jenna's shock, forging her confusion into a sharp, clear point of action. This woman, whether sister or stranger, had information they desperately needed. Reese, who had been listening silently, finally spoke. You said you have sources. What do you know about tonight? About the gala. Chiara turned to him, her professional demeanor snapping back into place. I know that's where they keep the primary genetic database. I know Matteo Bianchi will be there gloating. It's the most vulnerable they will ever be. She looked back at Jenna. I didn't just come to find my sister. I came to help you burn their entire operation to the ground. Jenna looked from Reese's skeptical face to Anya's calculating one, then to the woman who claimed to share her blood. It was a leap of faith more dangerous than any she had ever taken. But as she looked at her daughter, she knew the time for caution was over. Okay, Jenna said, her voice finding a new strength. Tell us everything. The transformation was jarring. From the cold, humming basement, they were whisked away to a discreet boutique where Chiara's contacts worked with silent efficiency. Jenna found herself standing before a full-length mirror, barely recognizing. The woman staring back, the simple, tired mother was gone, placed by a vision in a floor-length gown of emerald silk that clung to her frame before cascading to the floor. Her hair was swept up in an elegant twist, and a borrowed necklace of cold diamonds glittered at her throat. It was armor, beautiful and impenetrable. Across the room, Reese looked equally transformed in a tailored tuxedo, the sharp lines amplifying his imposing presence rather than softening it. He wasn't a guest. He was a weapon, sheathed in black tie. Anya, in a sleek black dress, was already tapping on a tablet, her face a mask of focused intensity. Kiara, in a stunning crimson dress, finished applying her lipstick and met Jenna's. "Eyes in the mirror. Ready?" Kiara asked, her voice steady. Jenna took a deep breath, the scent of expensive perfume filling her lungs. She thought of Sophie, safe for now, with Alina in a separate, hyper-secure location, the tracking signal temporarily masked by a sophisticated jammer Anya had rigged. This was for her. Ready? Palazzo dei Diamante was a blaze of light and sound. Limousines disgorged Rome's glitterati onto a red carpet under the flash of paparazzi cameras. The air thrummed with money, power, and a casual arrogance that made Jenna's skin crawl. Holding onto Reese's arm, she let him guide her through the throng, his body a solid, reassuring presence amidst the surreal pageantry. Anya and Kiara melted into the crowd ahead of them, each with a role to play. The plan was a delicate clockwork of misdirection. Anya, the journalist, would create a distraction at the main reception, drawing security's eye. Kiara, using her knowledge of the guest list and the palazzo's layout, would guide them to the service entrance that led to the secured administrative wing. Reese was the muscle and the lockpick. Jenna was the key. Her face now digitally inserted into the guest list as the +1 of a fictitious German baron was their ticket through the initial checkpoints. They moved through grand ballrooms where champagne flowed like water, past conversations about art, investments, and political favors. Jenna kept her head high, a serene smile plastered on her face, her heart hammering against her ribs. And then she saw him, Matteo Bianchi. He stood near a towering ice sculpture, holding court, looking every bit the benevolent philanthropist. His smile was warm, his hand gestures generous. The sight of him sent a bolt of pure hatred through her, so potent she feared it would crack her porcelain facade. Reese single quotes hand tightened on her arm, a silent warning and an anchor. Not yet. His voice was a whisper barely audible over the string quartet. Look, but don't stare. Kiara caught her eye from across the room and gave a nearly imperceptible nod. The distraction was in play. A moment later, a commotion erupted near the main doors. Anya, feigning a spectacular fainting spell, complete with a dropped tray of champagne flutes. As security and guests rushed to the scene, Kiara gestured toward a draped alcove. Now, Reese murmured. They slipped away from the crowd, through the heavy curtain, and into a dim, quiet hallway reserved for staff. The gilded illusion of the gala vanished, replaced by stark white walls and the faint smell of disinfectant. Kiara led them with confident steps, pausing only to let Reese disable a camera with a small device that emitted a low-frequency pulse. "The server room is at the end of this hall," Kiara whispered, her voice tense. "Keycard and biometric scan. This is where it gets hard." Reese produced a thin wallet of tools and a small tablet. "I can bypass the keycard. The biometrics are the problem. It'll be tuned to senior staff, which is why we have a plan." "B," Kiara said, pulling a small case from her clutch. Inside, on a bed of foam, was a lifelike latex replica of a fingerprint and a higher-resolution photograph of an iris. From the head of its security, he's indisposed for the evening. Reese took the materials with a grim nod. 60 seconds. Then we're in. As he worked on the door, Jenna felt the seconds stretch into eternity. Every distant footstep, every echo in the hallway, sounded like an approaching threat. She watched Reese's hands, steady and sure, and felt a surge of something more than gratitude. It was trust, deep and absolute. With a soft click, the door unlocked. RHYS pushed it open, and they spilled into the cold humming silence of the server room. Racks of blinking lights and worry machines stretched into the gloom. Anya. "We're in," Reese said into a tiny mic on his lapel. "Copy." Anya's voice came back, slightly breathless. "Distraction won't last much longer. 5 minutes." Kiara went straight to a central terminal. "This is it. The genetic archive." Her fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up directories with chilling names. Project Lineage. Asset Development. Natural Acquisition. Jenna watched, her blood running cold as files populated the screen. Hundreds of names, thousands of data points. Developmental reports, medical records, school transcripts. It was a library of stolen lives. And then she saw it. A folder labeled Rossi S. She reached out, her hand trembling, and opened it. Inside were pictures of Sophie, ultrasound. Images from her prenatal care, her footprints from the hospital, detailed charts of her growth, her vocal patterns, her sleep cycles. It was a violation so profound it stole the air from Jenna's lungs. "Download everything," Reese urged, connecting a high-capacity drive to the server. "We need to move." The progress bar filled with agonizing slowness. 80%. 90. The hum of the servers seemed to grow louder, masking the sound of the door until it was too late. The handle turned. Reese reacted instantly, shoving Jenna and Kiara behind a server rack and drawing his weapon. The door opened to reveal not a squad of security, but Matteo Bianchi. He stood alone, his tuxedo impeccable, a polite smile on his face. In his hand, he held not a gun, but a small, palm-sized device. "Jenna," he said, his voice smooth as oil, "I must say you clean up wonderfully, though breaking and entering is a curious choice for a +1. "It's over, Matteo," Jenna said, stepping out from behind the rack, her voice stronger than she felt. "We have it all. Do you?" he asked, his smile never wavering. He held up the device. "This is a remote kill switch for the servers. One press, and every byte of data in this room becomes unrecoverable slag. Your drive included." His eyes flicked to the progress bar. 95%. A stalemate, it seems. Reese kept his weapon trained on him. "You won't press it. That data is your life's work. Life's work can be rebuilt." Matteo shrugged. "The loss of it would be inconvenient, but the loss of my freedom would be permanent. So I propose a trade. Drive. You walk out of here. You disappear. And I forget I ever saw you." Jenna looked at the screen, at the evidence of Sophie's life treated as mere data. She looked at Matteo's smug, confident face, and she knew he would never forget. He would never stop. Disappearing would only mean looking over their shoulders forever. The progress bar hit 100%. Reese gave a barely perceptible nod. "No," Jenna said, her voice clear and cold in the humming room. "We're not making a trade." Smile finally faded. A pity. His thumb moved toward the button. Reese didn't fire. He moved. In a blur of motion, he crossed the space between them, his hand closing around Matteo's wrist a split second before his thumb could press down. There was a sharp crack, the sound of breaking bone. And Matteo cried out in pain and shock, the device clattering to the floor. Reese drove him back against the wall, his forearm pressed against his throat. The polished facade of the philanthropist utterly shattered. "The data is ours." Reese growled, his face inches from Matteo's. "And you're finished." From the floor, the device began to emit a high-pitched whine, a red light flashing on its side. Matteo, despite his pain, managed a choked laugh. "Dead man's switch. You shouldn't have touched me, Reese." Jenna screamed. Anya's voice shouted through their earpieces. "Security's mobilizing. They're coming your way. Get out." Reese released Matteo, snatching the drive from the server. "Go now." Chiara was already at the door, peering. "Out. Clear." They ran, leaving Matteo slumped against the wall, clutching his broken wrist. They fled back down the sterile hallway. The sound of the whining device and shouting guards echoing behind them, the palazzo's heart of darkness. Now exposed and screaming in their wake, they had the evidence, but the labyrinth was collapsing around them. The escape from the palazzo was a blur of shouting, splintering wood, and the shatter of glass. They didn't use the main halls but fled through service corridors and kitchens. A chaotic retreat covered by Anya's strategically triggered fire alarm that sent panicked guests streaming into the night. They spilled out into a narrow alley, reeking of garbage and damp stone, the sounds of the gala's chaos fading behind them. A nondescript delivery van, arranged by Kiara, screeched to a halt, and they tumbled inside, their fine clothes torn and smudged, hearts pounding. For 3 days they vanished. The world outside erupted with the story Anya and Thomas Chunkyara's journalist, Contact Unleashed. Evidence was damning, irrefutable. The genetic databases, the financial trails, the internal memos discussing acquisition and neutralization of liabilities. Omnicorp didn't just collapse. It imploded, consumed by international warrants, shareholder revolts, and the very governments it had infiltrated. Matteo Bianchi was arrested trying to flee the country, his broken wrist still in a cast. Their safe house this time was not a basement or a sterile apartment, but a sun-drenched, airy flat in a quiet corner of Monteverdi, lent by a friend of Chiara's. The walls were painted a warm yellow, and the windows looked out over a terrace overflowing with geraniums and the distant terracotta-colored skyline. Of Rome it felt like a real home. Jenna stood on that terrace now, the early morning sun warm on her skin. The frantic terror of the past week had subsided, leaving in its wake a profound, almost dizzying quiet. In the living room behind her, Sophie sat on a rug, not just babbling, but clearly trying to mimic the words Chiara was patiently repeating to her. "Sia," Chiara said, pointing to herself. "Aunt Aya," Sophie repeated, her tiny face screwed up in concentration before breaking into a gummy smile. The sound filled Jenna with a warmth that had nothing to do with the sun. She had a sister. The lonely narrative of her life had been rewritten, the empty spaces filled with the unexpected, fierce presence of Chiara. The terrace door slid open. Reese stepped out, holding 2 small cups of espresso. He too had shed his tactical gear for simple jeans and a sweater. The transformation was more than sartorial. The sharp edges of the soldier had softened into the steady calm of a man at rest. He handed her a cup. "Any news?" Jenna asked, taking the strong, bitter brew. "Anya's final report," he said, leaning against the railing beside her. "The last of Omnicorp's board was taken into custody overnight. It's done, truly done." The words settled over her. Done. No more running, no more looking over their shoulders. Sophie was finally, completely free. The microtransponder had been safely removed by a trusted doctor, Anya knew, and now existed only as evidence in a sealed evidence locker. "What will you do now?" Jenna asked, looking at him. "Now that your job is finished?" Reese looked out over the city, then back at her, his blue eyes holding hers. "My job was to protect you, both of you." He paused, choosing his words with a care that made her heart beat faster. "That doesn't feel like a job that has an end date." He didn't move, but the space between them seemed to shrink, charged with everything unsaid. The trust forged in desperation, the quiet moments of understanding, the way his presence had become her anchor. Jenna set her coffee down. She reached out, her fingers brushing against his, where they rested on the railing. A simple touch, but it felt like a decision. He turned his hand, lacing his fingers through hers. His grip was sure, warm. He didn't pull her closer, just held her hand, letting the silence speak for him. It was an offer, not of protection out of duty, but of partnership, out of choice. From inside, Sophie let out a delighted squeal. They both turned to look. Yara was now dancing around the room with her, a whirl of laughter and movement. The sight of it, so normal and so joyful, was the final piece settling into place. "I'm not going back to New York," Jenna said. Turning back to him, "This feels like a beginning. Chiara is here, and I want to see what happens next. Here, with you." Reese's smile was slow and real, transforming his entire face. "Lisa," he brought her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss too. Her knuckles that was both a promise and an answer. "Then we stay." Later that evening, after Sophie was asleep and Chiara had retired for the night, Jenna found Reese still on the terrace, watching the lights of the city twinkle on. She came to stand beside him, and this time, he didn't hesitate. He drew her into his arms, his body solid and warm against hers. She rested her head on his shoulder. The same place where this impossible journey had begun on an airplane, but now it was a choice, a comfort, a home. He tilted her chin up, his gaze searching. Hers in the dim light before he lowered his mouth to hers. The kiss was not one of frantic passion, but of profound relief and burgeoning promise. It was slow and deep, a silent communication of all the words they were still learning to say. It tasted of espresso and a future she had never dared to imagine. When they finally parted, foreheads resting together, the world was quiet except for the distant hum of the eternal city. The fear was gone. In its place was a simple, extraordinary, ordinary life waiting to be built. Together, Jenna took his hand, leading him inside, away from the terrace, and toward the quiet bedroom. The door closed softly behind them, sealing them. In their own private world, there in the soft darkness, the intimacy that followed was a silent language of its own. It was the gentle exploration of scars and secrets, the mapping of skin finally safe to touch. It was his hands, so capable of violence, tracing her spine with a reverence that made her breath catch. It was her lips learning the landscape of his shoulders, tasting the salt of his skin, feeling the steady, strong beat of his heart under her palm. It was a coming home not to a place, but to a person, a slow, tender unraveling of the last vestiges of fear, replaced by a warmth that spread through her limbs, heavy and sweet. It was the quiet, gasping culmination of weeks of unspoken tension. A union that felt less like a new chapter and more like the first sentence of the rest of their lives the next morning. Sunlight streamed into the room. Jenna woke to find RHYS already awake, propped on an elbow, just watching her sleep, a look of quiet wonder on his face. Downstairs, she could hear the sounds of Kiara talking to Sophie, the clatter of breakfast dishes, the simple, beautiful music of a family. She smiled, reaching out to touch his face. No words were needed. The story that had begun with a moment of exhausted vulnerability had woven itself into a tapestry of resilience. It's found family and a love that had emerged from the heart of danger. As she rose to join the day, she knew with certainty that her daughter would grow up surrounded by love, defined not by what she was, but by who she chose to be. And for the first time, Jenna's own future looked not like a path she had to walk alone, but like a wide, sunlit horizon, waiting to be discovered together.